Hello, welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse. And before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British Rail critics, and of course my underwater train finders. You are the reason why this content remains magical. And today, we're going to be discussing a definitely really real, absolutely, totally not made up place called the island of Sodor. It's an island located in the United Kingdom, but it's technically in the Irish Sea, between England's Lake District and the Isle of Man. The Isle of Sodor contains a railway known as the Northwestern Railway, sometimes called Sodor Railways, and it's a standard gauge rail network that is the main bloodstream of the island. Now, NWR managed to avoid a lot of the ineptness from British Rail during the 1960s because they just resisted nationalization entirely. They remained independent, and today they are known as a heritage railway with a whole bunch of steam locomotives. But just like every railway out there, they couldn't avoid having terrible, horrible trains all over the place. It happens to them all. So these are 5 of the worst trains on the island of Sodor. Derek, sometimes called the Paxman Diesel. Derek was a diesel called in to assist Bill and Ben when Sir Topham Hatt realized they needed assistance in their duties. But Derek, well, if he looks familiar, yeah, he's a class 17, and that's not good. Class 17s are one of the worst pieces of equipment that British Railways actually had. Their Paxman engines, of which they had 2, were known for consistently just breaking all the time. Derek, in particular, suffered from what he described as teething troubles, which is hilarious because the Class 17's teething troubles were actually never resolved at all. Now, to Derek's credit, he was extremely polite with everyone around him, and very apologetic for his issues. He wasn't mean or pretentious, so I could kind of give him a little bit of a benefit in terms of at least being nice about the whole thing. Yeah, he had some problems, but at least he was a kind soul. And that could not be said for pretty much every other locomotive on this list. The Class 40, sometimes called D261, is a diesel so unnotable that he doesn't even have a name. He was also loaned to the Northwestern Railway from British Railways, and judging by the name is actually a Class 40, which was a legitimately good diesel that British Railways had on their roster. Apparently, being one of the only decent ones at the time, D261 let this go straight to his head and became one of the most arrogant, unspeakably obnoxious individuals that has ever run on the lines of Sodor. He was just the worst, and he had the unspeakable gall to be that way and then completely fail because his air intake absorbed a bowler hat. He was undone by a hat. And again, the Class 40s are actually good diesels. So not only are you a pretentious jerk, but you're also a complete and utter failure and disgrace to your entire class. You're an embarrassment. I hope you're proud of that. Devious Diesel. We need to talk about this guy. We really need to talk about this, because who constructed this Class 08 and then named him Devious? Seriously? Seriously? You expected him to not be horrible? By naming him Devious? I mean, yes, he was functional as a Class 08, but he's, kinda evil in a lot of ways. Like, best, he's a bully. And I'm sure someone's gonna try to correct me and be like, well, they don't actually name them, they come with their names. Okay, so if someone didn't name him Devious, then what you are now suggesting is that when he was built, they asked him his name, and he said Devious. I don't know about you, but if I were the builders, and my creation indicated that their name was something like Devious, I might consider just, unbuilding them. immediately. True to his name, Devious Diesel, who's usually just called Diesel, is a consistent manipulator who framed Duck for making fun of the other locomotives. He's been sent away from Sodor more times than I care to count, yet for some reason Sir Topham Hatt always lets him come back. I don't know why. There are a lot of Class 08s out there. Why this one? Why is it always this one? Why is he here? Why is he always here? Get him out of here! He's terrible! He's an awful individual! He comes with a typical Diesel superiority complex, and even though his time has gone on, he's tried to be a little bit nicer, he's still really bad about it. And I enjoy the fact he keeps talking about the future of diesels, as if they are so superior to the steam engines. First of all, you're racist. Second of all, you have any idea how many Class 08s were scrapped? Do you have any idea how many of your brothers and sisters died because they built so many of you? You are redundant. You are replaceable. You mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. You're barely an individual. At least many of the steam engines have the benefit of being the last of their kind, therefore they're a unique museum piece. You're not unique. You're not special. You're just terrible. Arry and Bert. Okay. I see we're still talking about Class 08s. Well, everything about Diesel pretty much stands with these two, though at least in their case, they don't have obviously horrifically evil names, and yet that hides a devious, horrible element of their personalities, in that they are absolutely and 100% willing to attempt to commit murder. See, there was an unfortunate incident regarding Stepney, who wound up lost and turned around in a scrapyard where Arry and Bert were working. They assumed he was there to be scrapped, and without missing a beat, immediately opted to try to kill him. Apparently their drivers were totally down for this plan too. They had no questions. They didn't even raise any objections to this. They just said, oh yeah, that was a steam engine right there. Yeah, let's murder him. Even though Stepney is one of the most famous preserved steam locomotives, and you'd think at least one of their crew might be a little bit familiar with him, or maybe Arry and Bert might say something. No, of course not. They really, really desperately wanted to kill Stepney, and that's adorable, because much like I just said with Devious, Arry and Bert are Class 08s. Most of you are going to die. How does it feel? How does it feel? Diesel 10, or sometimes simply just called Diesel, which is confusing, but Diesel 10 is by far the worst locomotive ever to grace the island of Sodor. Not in terms of performance, as he's a diesel hydraulic BR Class 42. The 42s were actually alright, unlike their very, 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 very inept cousins, the Class 43s, which were terrible. But Diesel 10 here has a bit of a issue with mental health and possible psychopathy and sociopathy, and being a vicious serial killer. See, he was given a hydraulic excavator claw arm, which he named Pinchy. First of all, that's illegal. That is not an appropriate modification and not permitted under British rail guidelines. You're not even allowed to have that. But more to the point, he works a lot with scrap and goes out of his way to attempt to murder any steam locomotive he comes by, even threatening other diesels. The dude is a maniac, and yet somehow, and I still don't know how, he's allowed to mosey around the island of Sodor, with Sir Topham Hatt seemingly blissfully unaware of his slight tendency to inflict horrific, painful death on everyone around him. And you know, this is an important question for me that I kind of brought up with Arry and Bert, but I'm gonna bring it up here. Who the heck is driving this guy? These are locomotives. They need drivers. What driver is controlling Diesel 10 who's totally down for wanton homicide? I can only assume it's Jason Voorhees, or perhaps Leatherface. It's really the only thing that makes any sense anymore. And if you think looking at this list that I've been mean to diesels, well, first of all, there's a lot of evil diesels on Sodor. I don't know what their problem is. Especially in the early days, they were all just mean all the time. But there are decent diesels around. Mavis, Boko, can you teach your compatriots to stop being just the worst? For 2 seconds, that's all I'm asking. That being said, the island of Sodor is a beautiful place and a beautiful heritage railway, and I would love to visit someday. It's not real, though. It's April Fool's, guys. It's not real. And with that, a special thank you to all my underwater train finders. Some Dude 267, Orange Glass, Royal Hudson 2860, Benjamin Owens, Panzer Kitsune 131-232, Mr. Black Rose, Josh Johnson, Middle for Life Guy, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, DM Trouble Typhoon, Tommy Rossini, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Joshua Long, Brian, Jack Carson's Railroad Videos, Major Klutz, Hayden DeGrow, Master of None, Dr. Racer 78, Crystal Morgan, Ohio Trucker 1, Lord Hoth 444, and Alaric Jaspers. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.